Do I desire a world I rule instead of one that rules me? How does one move through this dream world of time and space without feeling at times that one has become a victim of it? The key is to see the blame and guilt the villain one sees in the other blocks one's underlying peace of mind, as the attraction of guilt opposes the attraction of love. All anger is really an attempt to make another guilty. The anger blocks one's own awareness of love's constant presence. Victimhood is debilitating. Victims see themselves as helpless and small, which is not the truth of what one is. Course teacher Ken Wapnick points out that others can learn from your example, when regardless of the situation, you remain peaceful. For you teach that justification in feeling unfairly treated is not necessary. No one but oneself can take away one's peace of mind. Yet when one does, one has picked up a sword and made a war of right and wrong in one's own mind. Lesson 31. I am not the victim of the world I see. Workbook Lesson 31 states that the idea I am not a victim of the world is a declaration of independence in the name of one's freedom. One is being freed from the fear of seeing oneself as little and vulnerable. The ego mind perceives itself as limited to being a body, which then feels compelled to defend itself from other bodies through attack, judgment, and holding grievances. No one wants to feel victimized, but how one interprets attack is a choice. The Roman philosopher Marcus Aurelius made the distinction between being harmed and feeling harmed. He saw attack as an objective fact that occurs in everyone's experience. Yet how one feels about it, how one regards it, what meaning one gives to it is up to oneself. Jesus in A Course in Miracles teaches that he did not see himself as a victim of the crucifixion. Only bodies can be attacked, and when you feel persecuted, you are teaching yourself and others that you are a body, which is not the essential nature of what one was created to be. Beware of the temptation to perceive yourself unfairly treated. Seeing oneself as a victim leaves one with grievances, which interfere with one's ability to see the situation clearly, and blocks one's effective action. As teacher Eckhart Tolle points out, when you complain, you make yourself into a victim. When you speak out, you are in your power. Victim identity reinforces the belief that one is at the mercy of outside forces, outside the mind. One feels taken hostage and controlled by the situation. One feels weakened. And those who see themselves as weakened do attack, either in action or in thought. Course teacher David Hoffmeister points out that to see oneself as unfairly treated is to look through the ego's dark glass of separation and division. Victims and victimizers are then perceived as being different, as having different interests. And the unity of spirit's vision is lost. Mother Teresa, in helping others, did not see victims and villains. She saw the face of Christ in everyone. For healing must be for everyone, or there is no justice in it. What if you recognize this world is an hallucination? What if you really understood you made it up? The reason I am not a victim of the world I see, Lesson Idea 31, is answered by the following workbook lesson 32, which states, I have invented the world I see. If I am the inventor, the originator of the world I see, giving it all the meaning it has for me, how could I be its victim? How can one be a victim of something one has imagined in one's mind? Thoughts which one's mind projects outward in the form of images are the source of how one sees the world. Thus, one cannot be a victim of the world itself, but one can feel a victim of one's fearful interpretations of the world. Fear hurts, and it arises from one's fearful beliefs. When one feels peaceful, one has already given the power of decision over to the spirit of wisdom, to the spirit of love. As author Leo Tolstoy writes, if you make it a habit not to blame others, you will feel the growth of the ability of love in your soul, and you will see the growth of goodness in your life. Listen to what the ego says and see what it directs you see, and it is sure that you will see yourself as tiny, vulnerable, and afraid. The thought system of the ego, one's voice of fear, is built on the belief that one is an isolated and limited body self. The ego believes that the world has the power to determine one's fate, and that one is a vulnerable form subject to the laws of the world, a world which teaches attack or be attacked, kill or be killed. When the body suffers in any way, one believes it is oneself that has been attacked. Yet spirit mind sees the body as merely one's communication device for the purpose of healing and for restoring the mind to one's original awareness of being. As teacher Ken Wapnick points out, the body is nothing more than a puppet that carries out the dictates of the mind. And when the puppet body has served its only real purpose of healing, it is gently laid aside as any well-worn and tattered device. The body can be maintained and sometimes repaired, but not preserved indefinitely. For what remains cannot be attacked. For what is real cannot be threatened. The very essence of the Course's teaching. The wish to be unfairly treated is a compromise attempt that would combine attack and innocence. Why would anyone desire to see oneself as unfairly treated? Yet it is this one chooses when one assigns oneself the role of victim. It is an ego strategy to reclaim lost innocence through attack and transferring guilt onto others, who one deems less worthy. There is the Old Testament story in the book of Leviticus, where the sins of the villagers are placed on a goat, which is then chased out of the village for the purpose of ridding the villagers of their sins. This story, which is the origin of the word scapegoat, is mindful of the ego's attempt to blame others in order to restore its own sense of lost innocence. In the ego's game of guilt, one projects one's own guilt onto others with the magical belief one has escaped the guilt, as well as escaping the punishment that the guilt calls for. Yet one has not recognized that the guilt remains in one's mind, for ideas can never leave the mind that made them. What one perceives in another is what one perceives in oneself. Suffering is an emphasis upon all that the world has done to injure you. A victim viewpoint highlights all that the world has done to make you suffer. And the world one imagines to be outside oneself appears to be very real. Suffering turns the world into serious business, and perceiving oneself then as an entity within the world, one can hold grievances toward oneself. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron, in her book The Wisdom of No Escape, points out that the biggest obstacles to awakening are complaints held toward oneself, holding a grudge about what one is, where one is, and what one is. By choosing instead to make friends with oneself, one begins to lighten up and trust then in the basic goodness of what one has and what one is. Inner wisdom recognizes that suffering comes from resisting what is presenting itself in the present moment. All healing begins by returning awareness to the source of attack in the mind and being open to a kinder, gentler, more compassionate way of seeing. You who are sometimes sad and sometimes angry, who sometimes feel your just due is not given you, give up these foolish thoughts. Spirit mind does not judge oneself as bad or sinful when one harbors grievances and resentments. It merely sees one is unaware of what is in one's best interest. One is being reminded to look at the effects of one's judgments, for it is one's resentments that are the real source of the pain one suffers. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus was born into slavery and later freed, yet never perceived himself as a victim of his life circumstances. He saw victimhood as a self-inflicted wound, which had 3 stages of learning. First, the totally unaware person merely blames others for any perceived harm. Secondly, the partially aware person blames themselves, recognizing that they played a part in their own suffering. Finally, the fully aware person blames no one, seeing it is only one's interpretations that causes loss of inner peace. And to judge oneself merely changes the target without any relief from the attack. I choose the feelings I experience, and I decide upon the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked. In the channeled writings of Neale Donald Walsh's Conversations with God, we are told there are no villains and there are no victims in the world. For one has made all the circumstances in one's life situations, either at a conscious level where one is aware of it, or at a subconscious or superconscious level where one may not be aware. Ultimately, Everything experienced in a dream is somehow of one's own making. The Indian sage Ramana Maharshi taught that the only real difference between the waking state and the dream state is that the dream is short and waking is long. Therefore, one's only real choice is whether to respond to any given situation with love or with fear, with the vision of spirit or the judging eyes of the ego. And which one chooses as one's teacher will determine the emotions one feels and the goals that one seeks. It is impossible the Holy Spirit could see unfairness as a resolution. The perception of unfairness is what the higher mind seeks to correct, not to reinforce. For to perceive unfairness in anyone is a judgment that is itself unfair, both to the giver and receiver. When one perceives instead the innocence of the other, attack becomes impossible, and healing becomes possible. It is the ego's projection of lack and loss that gives material support for the belief in unfairness. The justice of spirit envisions no loser. No one is left unfairly treated or left without, leaving nothing to justify revenge. The attacker is seen as a victim of their own attack. For the first ones to be harmed is the attacker themselves, as there is no peace in attack. One literally makes oneself unhappy in the preparation to attack another. Thus, their attack is a call for help and healing. And correcting mistakes through the guidance of spirit becomes a beautiful way to express love. You cannot be unfairly treated. The belief you are is but another form of the idea you are deprived by someone not yourself. When we begin to recognize that the mind is constantly making decisions, one begins to appreciate the power of thought and one's responsibility with it. One replaces "I have to do this" with "I am choosing to do this." One begins to become aware of the part one is playing in any situation. One understands one can only be an enemy to oneself, for all conflict is a war occurring in one's own mind. Acceptance replaces resistance, and peace returns to one's thinking. One takes responsibility without blame. without judging oneself for past mistakes and poor choices. Seeing one only ever has partial evidence in any situation. One becomes open to an all-knowing presence. Every situation becomes an opportunity to affirm love and to deny fear. As St. Paul in Romans 8:31 asks, if God be for us, who can be against us? Nothing in the world is an attack against oneself, for everything is for oneself, and without an enemy, who can be a victim?